Hey, everybody. Time again for Drummer Nation Live. It's been a while, I'll tell you why. The first virtual PASIC happened last weekend. Did you go? I did. We'll talk about it right after this. Stay tuned. It's time for Drummer Nation.
I absolutely love playing drums, and I couldn't imagine not having that in my life. And I really, if I could help facilitate that and have an impact on your life so that you can play drums, that means the world to me.
Hello everyone, my name is David Victor. I'm General Manager with the Craviato Drum Company. We wanted to offer a one-ply, solid shell product, but we wanted it to stay true to our mission of offering handmade drums of uncompromised quality built here in the USA. So take a listen to our Center Stage Series drum set.
Memphis Drum Shop is the world's premier provider of percussion instruments. With 6 showrooms of gear, mycymbal.com, the Memphis Gong Chamber, and a first-rate repair department, turn to Memphis Drum Shop for all your percussion needs. And we're back. Hey, I've been a little remiss in my shows for the last, a month or so. I had some issues. Let me check some dynamics here. I had some issues, man. A few months ago, I got hit by lightning. I think I mentioned that on one of these shows. I didn't personally get hit. My house got hit and it fried a bunch of electronics in this here studio. So insurance covered that. And then about, 3 weeks ago, the house got hit by a giant tree that fell on it. When that Hurricane Zeta came through New Orleans, I was worried about New Orleans. It came here as a big tropical storm, 60, 70 mile an hour winds, and it toppled a 60 some odd foot tree, boom, onto the roof at 5:30 in the morning. It sounded like a car hitting your house. And, Atlanta is a beautiful city because it's one of the most heavily forested cities, major cities in the world. You can drive around the perimeter and not really see much city because there's so many trees. So the trees are beautiful. We live in a deciduous forest, but that means our houses are all surrounded by giant, 40, 50, 60, 70 foot hickory and oak and hardwood trees that are beautiful, especially this time of year. But every now and then, man, one falls down on your house. The kicker was it was my neighbor's yard, and we had to remove 3 giant trees to get to that one with a crane, a 75-ton crane. But the way it's set up, you might want to know this. If my tree falls on your house, you're responsible. Your insurance pays. So my neighbor opted not to pay anything. And what are you going to do? Anyway, we had a crew here for a long time, and the roof is all done. When I say the roof was messed up, I don't mean the shingles. I don't mean the paper stuff they put under that. I mean the rafters. Under the decking, the plywood boards that cover your roof, those were broken. And then underneath that, the rafters, the beams, whatever you want to call them, those were broken. You could see right inside my attic. So it was not fun for a while. But everything's fixed now, except I'll have the house repainted in a few weeks. And that's a long explanation for why I haven't been here regularly. I'm also a little bit behind in editing interviews I've done with Danny Gottlieb, Dave Maddox, and John Ramsey. So those are coming up. Okay, I think I mentioned last time that I've been involved with a couple of these Zoom meetings. I do one myself that's private invitation for the mega pros that have been on my shows. And it's not open to the public because people pay for access to those cats. And they come to these meetings and hang like they're at the bar with their friends, and what happens there kind of stays there. And there's another one I do on Tuesday nights that somebody else hosts. But what I was mentioning this for is I think drummers, you guys, gals, should set these up in your own communities. Wherever you live, you got to know a bunch of drummers there. Do a Zoom meeting once a week at 9:30 on an off night. Well, they're all off nights for us now. But it's pretty cool. It establishes a sense of community and helps everybody out. So you might want to consider doing that. I'll leave that to you guys, men and women, to figure out and set up on your own. Let me know how that goes. All right. We're out on the Facebook Live thing now, thanks to many of our participating partners. You can see this show on a lot of other pages besides Drummer Nation, and I appreciate that. Some of the advertising you see here is simply an exchange for cross-posting these shows for us. All right, so the topic of the day is PASIC. I went to the first virtual PASIC. I didn't actually go because it doesn't actually exist. I went to PASIC right here on the computer, and I have a lot of comments about that to share with you because I think that things are going to be different from now on and may never get exactly back to where they were. Okay, so let's talk about the idea of trade shows, conventions, and the like. Whatever organization you have, let's say PAS. I don't know how many members there are in PAS, but I know when you have a trade show, a fraction of your membership is able to come to the show, especially nowadays when you have travel, expense, hotels, food, hanging out with your friends, maybe buying something at the show. It's pretty darn expensive. And so if you have 50,000 people, maybe 10% of them will show up, maybe. And that's normal. They just can't make it. Work commitments, whatever. So that's the first problem with the old way of doing conventions. The second one is PASIC is wonderful at having like 5 things going on at once. You can kind of do a drum set track or a classical track or a world beat track or electronics a little bit, and you can, to see one, you have to not see the others, right? So if I want to see a great drum set clinic, I'm also making a choice not to see 4 others. And because this is virtual now, when you pay for the show, you're allowed to watch it all. Everything's archived through the end of the year. So the other benefit, obvious one, is that you get a lot more access to the stuff that you wouldn't even really see if you went there. So there's that, right? And COVID notwithstanding, it's going to come and go eventually, and we'll have to figure out how to handle these things. But those are some of the benefits of a show. The other thing, a virtual show. The other thing is it doesn't have to all happen on 2 days. It can happen periodically throughout the year. Okay, great. I went to the show. I watched most of the drum set stuff, and I'm going to talk about that. But I got to say the execution of it was fairly flawless. The technology of it was wonderful. And before I go any further, I'm a big fan of PASIC. I had a cymbal company, and for 10 years I had a booth there. And I liked it better than most of the other shows because the manufacturers are all there in the exhibit hall to talk to you. They're not looking for buyer badges like at NAMM. It's not a business event. It's a marketing event and a music event and something that encourages young players, any age players, to walk up to the president of the company who's in the booth and ask him what you want to know, or run into the greatest artist in the world who maybe you might have lunch with or something. So that I love PASIC for that interaction that you don't get anywhere else that's there for the drummers. Of course, when it goes virtual, that's the part you lose. So I'm not here to say that, hey, virtual is great. It's perfect. It's going to completely eliminate everything else. I'm here to say that it's got its pros and cons. The cons are there's no live in-person listening to music, right? There's no networking. Some of the older guys like me have been going for years. I go as much to see the artist and the presentations as I do to see my friends in the industry and check out their products, as I do to hang with my buddies who are educators and manufacturers and artists and just drummer friends and dinners and lunches and having a few drinks together and just the natural ebb and flow of hanging out with like-minded people that you like. Can't do that, right, at PASIC. Though you could, for each event, some of the events, there was a scrolling chat on one side, so you could talk to people that way. There was also an internal kind of email set up inside the program that enabled you to see who was attending and talk to them. All right. Of course, hands-on products you can't do. So let's get into the show. I have some stuff to show you. First of all, see if I can get this right. This is their logo, PASIC, right? They do this every year for whatever year the show is. Let me get that Drummer Nation logo out of there for you. All right. This is the website where you go to log in, and you see it's very evenly divided. Schedule, artist, expo, hall, and gift shop. We'll talk about each of those. It's pretty easy to navigate. You see that stuff on the left, and I'll show you what happens once you get in. This is the expo hall. Smaller than usual, obviously, but each one of those is a virtual booth. And when you click on those booths, you see what they've chosen to present. Here's the Sabian booth. You see the Sabian, most of them have an opening page like that, where they're able to put their masthead on there, and they usually have a video about their products. And then there's some way to contact people below that. And then those icons at the bottom, this is only part of the page, are their series. So you get into their, whatever they're selling, and there's videos there. Here is, in this one, you get a message from Andy Zildjian when you first come on. He's the president of the company. Looks like he's got his Canadian mask in tow there. Very cool. And they had symbols they had designed for the show, some kind of special to buy them. And there's Mark Love, their product design guru, great cat, who's doing a short video to show you that. That's what that's all about. All right, so that's the Sabian page. I wanted to mention here that Andy Zildjian, Andy bought my cymbal company, Crescent. So we're pals and we talk whenever we can. And we were having lunch 5 years ago, and I remember saying, Andy, I think it's going to a spot where every company, especially in this genre, is a media company. You're going to be responsible for generating media. And start thinking about that now. And he did. He was right on it. But here we are 5 years later at COVID, where it's very obvious that, years ago, you didn't have a budget for these kind of things. You didn't have in-house media production like you do now, because it's so easy. Hell, I'm in my basement doing this. So it was pretty evident at these shows, at this show, and I guess all shows, that that's the way this is going to have to go. Here is an example of the DW booth. Once you get in, there's a video for every series. Here's John Good talking about wood. He's the wood guru of that company. This is a video about their birch series. Here's another one about their mahogany series, Carl Allen there. And here's one about their maple. Well, they had tons of those videos, which gets back to what I was saying about being a media company, right? You got to be a media company because now you have to promote those things and produce those things. And it was unclear when you got into the artist as to who was responsible for creating the content, who owns it, stuff like that. Here's an example of a dealer. They've always been dealers at PASIC. I was never quite sure why they were there. They don't sponsor events, but they do broker the sales of all the things you can buy on the floor of PASIC. So most of the manufacturers who show up will try to sell as much as they can so that they can offset some of the cost. And in doing that, they're not going to undercut their dealers. They usually have a deal, an arrangement with one of the dealers on the floor. Ostensibly, the dealer pays the sales tax and brokers the whole thing, and you're not undercutting your dealer. And sometimes they'll buy your booth, or they'll take, it's worked out with each individual company and booth. Okay, here are, did I show you this before? A couple other booths. That's Gretsch. This is the homepage, like I told you about. That's the Gretsch homepage on the site for PASIC, and this is the one for DW. Okay. And a lot of times once you get into it deeply, you are on their website. So it's interesting how they combine those two together. Now let's talk about the clinics. The first one I saw was Will Calhoun, and he was outstanding. He did 30 minutes without teaching, without talking. He started with an electronic device and played a lot of music there. Then he moved over to the kit and he played a lot of music there, and he ended up back on a different electronic device. But I got to tell you that the quality of the content across the board for all the drum set things I saw was just outstanding. And that has a lot to do with the quality of the artist. Will Calhoun, of course, consummate, great drummer. And it was a show full of great, great drummers. But you can see that, you'll see in a minute that the quality, if I had to rate them all on how great the content was, I would say 5 stars out of 5. Quality of production is a new thing for our industry, oddly enough. And that went from 1 star to 5 stars. Here's an example. Vinny, and I'll be talking more about what these guys covered in the next show or two. I'm just talking about the show itself today. Here's Vinny Colaiuta. Now, Vinny doesn't need anybody to tell him he's a great drummer. He's a brilliant drummer. And his whole thing was to get out of the comfort zone and to play some different things. It was presented by Roland. So he played all this stuff on a Roland kit, and he had a bunch of electronics on the left there. And every time, he had parts of it was just music, then it had drums. He was playing with loops, playing without loops, all of his Vinnyisms, all of the great stuff that's Vinny, but in a whole new setting with electronics. Because every time he'd kick into a different tune, a different piece, different concept, he would have a different kit pulled up on the electronics. And he did it all flawlessly. Where it failed was, it's only one camera. That's the camera. And this was all pre-recorded somewhere else. So you see these kids in the front, they're taking pictures and talking to each other, and it's a little distracting. And at some point he stands up and he plays and messes with things over there. And you see this kid on the right kneeling down. He's getting a picture, but it's very distracting, and that's the shot we get. So Vinny, brilliant. Concept, brilliant. Execution, brilliant. Production, not so good. All pre-recorded from another event, which is not a dig. Not a dig at all. And then the next one I'll show you is David Garibaldi. He was live, and he did some teaching. So it was a combination of, do you do a music presentation, don't say anything? Do you play and teach? Do you just teach? I mean, is it a pre-record? Is it something you do live? Is it a mixture of both? Are you using one camera? Are you using a bunch of them? How's your audio? All those things varied a lot. I got to say the audio was outstanding on every one of them. Every one of them, the audio was outstanding. And from the negative side on production value with Vinny, the opposite side of it was the production value of Gavin Harrison. Gavin had too many cameras to count. Now, sometimes you do these things 2 or 3 times and you can move your cameras, but I don't think that's what he did. He did it right. The audio was terrific. Every drum was clear and wonderfully mixed. He could turn and talk to you like he is in the top left in this picture, or he could sit at the kit and play. That's kind of the best way to see a drummer, I think, is over the left shoulder if they're right-handed. Here's the opposite view, and here's another cam. He had a foot cam. He had he had all kinds of cameras, and for overall quality of video, of media production, his was fantastic. There were some others that were great too, that I'll talk about next week. But I think that's what I want to cover this time, is the show itself, the benefits and the detriments of a virtual show, whether or not this is something we're going to be doing all the time. And what we said about a media company, every company being a media company, I want you to ask yourself as drummers, how does that apply to you? How does that apply to you? A lot of us are teaching. We're teaching virtually. This is my rig. I've talked to great teachers who said, I'm just not with it. I don't dig the whole online thing. I like to be right in a room with a guy. You touch him on the back and tell him to sit up, or you move a wrist or whatever, just have that person-to-person contact that you don't get this way. And several people who are great teachers have told me they've abandoned this thing because they don't dig this stuff. See, I like the tech. I enjoy it. I have fun with it. But once you venture into that realm, you're going to spend a lot of time on cameras and lights and microphones and multicams and editing. And even if you're live, you've got to deal with shading and color grading. And, there's a lot to do that maybe you don't want to do, right? Maybe that's not your thing, and that's cool. And then, of course, on the other side, the student has to have something sophisticated enough to get the message to you of what they're playing. Because if you just have an open mic on a laptop and you start playing a snare drum, you know what that sounds like. It's and so it's hard to make sense out of that as a lesson. If you're going to spend $200 for a lesson, from a major drummer, I've heard people say, well, I don't care what the gear is. The guy is the teacher is the mentor, and the responsibility is on me to absorb what the teacher has to say, and I'm going to them for a reason, and I don't care if their video and audio are not that great because I'm getting access to a wonderful artist. Valid point. Other valid point, if I'm going to spend $200 to $300 for an hour lesson, I want to be able to clearly hear and see who I'm talking to and what I'm getting. Everybody's got their own opinion on this. I think it depends on who you are, who you're teaching, where you are, what your experience is as a student or a teacher. So I've tried not to make any conclusions on this show, but to just kind of outline the questions. So you think about that. Think about how much of this stuff you want to jump into, if any, and how it affects teaching or studenting, if I can make a verb out of that. All right. I guess that's all I have to say for today. I would encourage you to, I'm going to get back on the stick in terms of editing these videos in the can and get my full Drummer Nation shows back running. I'm going to be doing at least two more of these on PASIC because I'd like to cover the artist and what they do. And I want to talk to PASIC again about letting me use what they call fair use for video. I think people would like to see what this is all about. And I don't pimp out any of the artists. They make their living on these things. I want to be able to use 15, 30 seconds to show you what it's about. But I'll talk to PASIC about that, or PAS, and respect their wishes. They were very generous to me in getting me a media badge, and they've been very helpful as always. So I dig it. By the way, the other thing I had in my notes here, I'm looking at the sort of unmentioned star of the show was Roland, because they had a lot of clinics they presented, and the electronics lend themselves very well to this format. I'm not an electronic drummer guy, but I have a kit back there because when I want a student to hear it perfectly clear, just play it on that. The thing is I can record tracks for people using that and BFD, and it doesn't matter that I have a tiny room. So you have to figure out where you fit into that too with electronics. Love them, hate them. It's all good, man. No, there's no right or wrong here. You just have to come to terms with how you're going to deal with these things based on who you are. Okay, I guess that's all I have. I don't see any comments because no one's listening. Now people watch and they watch in post. If I can find the right thing, I'll get us out of here. Here we go. Thanks a lot. See you next week. Back to Wednesdays at 1, and we'll cover some more of this stuff. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.